You're listening to Can I Get a Retake, where education meets innovation. Every month, we host conversations with the thinkers, teachers, and researchers shaping the world around us. We hope you tune in, get inspired, and join the conversation.
We appreciate all three of you joining us today, especially Peter. This is your second time speaking with us on the pod, but we also welcome Mary and Liz. Altogether, you have created the Trade Director Diaries. We welcome you, and let's get started.
All right. Well, to kick it off, how about telling us each a little bit about yourselves and your background and how you got involved in international trade?
I'll go first. I'm a native Mississippian. I got involved in international trade just out of college. I went to work in the international division of a regional bank in Memphis, Tennessee. And then I got a call from Thad Cochran, who was then a member of the House from Mississippi and DC. And he hired me because I didn't know anything about politics. He hired me to go to DC and represent him on foreign relations committees, et cetera, and handle international relations, do all his embassy work and that type of thing. And so I got a background in protocol there. And then I got a call from the state of Mississippi to come and initiate an international trade program for Mississippi. And so I said, I'll come for a year. And I was there for 34 years before I retired. And worked for 7 different governors, arranging their overseas trips and setting up appointments for them, hosting all international visitors that came into the state, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the division just grew and grew, and we added some foreign offices. And I got involved at the national level with the international trade directors organizations. And I've just been in it this whole time. So it's been a great career for me. I retired about 8 years ago.
I worked in state government in a number of positions before I actually got into international trade. I was their legislative liaison, and I worked for various governors. But when one particular person became governor, Tommy Thompson, he really wanted to expand international development in the state of Wisconsin. And when I first started, I was an international, the person that handled Canada and Mexico. And I did the same thing Liz did. You know, I organized all the governor's trade missions. Tommy Thompson was the ultimate cheerleader for Wisconsin. So that was a great time, and I truly love my time. I've been retired now since 2011, but I had a little consulting business, and I worked specifically with just one company, helping them expand their international connections. So until again, Peter got a hold of Liz and I and said, "Come on, let's write a book."
For me, it was family, right? My mom was Canadian. It wasn't until I went to my undergraduate degree at George Washington University in DC that I took my first intro to international business course. And that's when it clicked for me. That's when I realized this is what I want to do. I joined the U.S. Department of Commerce as an international trade specialist at a grad school. I liked the policy aspect of trade, but I really liked working in the field. I liked working with the companies. I spent a couple years in Iowa, got promoted to the Colorado office. And while I was there, I got to meet Governor Mike Sullivan from Wyoming. Like Liz, he offered me a job, start the international trade program for Wyoming, which I thought, well, that'll be a challenge. But it was an amazing experience. Once I got involved in the National Association, I got a number of opportunities to work for states where they needed some help. At the end, I finally realized, I got a little tired of the different changes. So I thought, this might be a time to pursue academia. I've always liked teaching part-time international business and international trade, and that's how I was offered the job at Mount Hood Community College here in Portland. I'm a full-time economics instructor there, and that's where I got the idea to write the book and to get us all, talking more about trade and the importance of training our next generations on how trade policy should work.
Peter, to kind of go back into what the foundations of, the principles of international trade are, before we really delve into how the current policies might be affecting the people that are the next generation of trade directors?
Yeah, that's a hot issue right now, as you know. And when we created the Trade Director Diaries, we started from a good foundation. The first chapter was basically a history of international trade. We went all the way back to Ricardo, who came up with a theory of comparative advantage. We brought it all the way up to Michael Porter and his diamond model from Harvard, adapting these international trade theories of comparative advantage into modern day time to focus on regional clusters and all that sort of. We give a crash course to the students so they have a solid foundation. But we wanted to put the book more in a contemporary context. Okay, how does all this relate to today? And so we've educated them on the different types of trade policy, right? What is, free trade was basically it until the early 1900s. And then we had some pretty devastating impacts in our economy. And that's when we passed the Smoot-Hawley Act in the 1930s. And, it's so disturbing to see this history repeating itself in this regard, because we're entering a period of protectionism that we haven't seen. We saw a little bit of it in the first Trump administration, but now he's really going gangbusters. We read today in the media outlets that the challenge with Mexico. I mean, the Mexican president has basically talked him back a little bit, and now Mexico has a little break. They're not going to get these additional 25% tariffs until April 2nd. Canada unfortunately didn't cut that deal, so we're seeing some dramatic footage in Canada of they're already retaliating against us, right? And I saw some videos of Kentucky bourbon being taken off the shelves throughout Canada. So it's happening now. There is a reprieve in the automotive industry, thank goodness, because after NAFTA and now the USMCA, there's so much integration, that wasn't there during Smoot-Hawley during the 1930s. We had so much economic integration between Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. Parts go 7 times across the border, so there'll be 7 times, adding a tax, to make all the motor vehicles are going to be purchasing, unaffordable, in the next several years. So that's just one example. So I'm hoping that the business community is going to step in, and the lobbyists and the people that understand the markets have gone down quite a bit in the last few days. These are also indicators of the concern that executives are having, throughout, not just in the U.S., but globally. Our markets are so integrated with China, in North America, Europe. We can't just pull back and pretend it's the 1930s and, throw up isolationist policies. It led to the worst economic crisis we've ever had in the history of our country, and we don't want to repeat that. So we're hoping that there'll be some common sense, that hopefully some of the judges will help us stop some of these policies from being fully implemented before it's too late.
For our audience that might not be familiar with it, could you do just a real short recap of what the
Sure.
Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act is?
What happened was in the 1930s, there was concern, about import. We raised import tariffs. Basically, put America first was sort of the policy back then, right? That sounds familiar, right? So we decided that we're going to raise our tariffs on every country globally, right? And what happens when you start a trade war like that? They wanted to encourage people to buy American products, and it sounds great from a nationalist point of view or from a patriotic point of view, but the reality is we learned from history that it's better to focus on what you do best. Ricardo taught us that back in the 1700s. Each individual, each company should focus on specializing in what they do best. It's called comparative advantage. So during Smoot-Hawley, we basically said, we're going to put 10, 15, 20, 30% taxes or tariffs on every product coming from every country globally. So what countries do in that situation is they say, look, you're, discriminating against us, you're making us pay all this extra money to come to your country. We're going to retaliate, and we're going to raise the same tariffs or taxes on goods coming from the U.S. into our countries. So it just went into a downward spiral. One thing I'm concerned about right now with President Trump's trade policies is the issue of regressive taxes, right? That regressive tariffs. It's a hot issue right now, and it basically means, post World War II, the U.S. tended to lower all of our import duties from various countries, especially developing countries. We're trying to help them build their economies, right? So, and one way to do that is through export, right? Japan has done it, Korea has done it. We've had so many countries. Germany came back from devastation of World War II because we gave them all these basically free access to our market. And we've tried through all these different trade agreements globally, regional trade agreements, to reduce those barriers to make it easier for companies in other countries to do business with us and to grow their economy and to create jobs there. It's stabilizing from a political standpoint, as well as from a business standpoint. When you start looking at regressive tariffs and saying, if you're charging me, India, 50% to bring in this particular product from the U.S., we're going to charge you 50% for the same product when you bring it back into the U.S. So it escalates the war, and it puts us into a negative downward spiral that it took us into World War II, the end of World War II, to get out of it, right? So this is a pretty serious situation, and for people that don't understand trade policy, they think, oh, put America first. This is a great idea, but when you go into the details and look at history, you see that the opposite is true. We're better to have free trade and fair trade policies to help bring these countries up and to help support them grow.
Well, I would say the majority of Americans don't understand tariffs. They don't understand international business. And I think that the president has made it, tariffs are the most beautiful word in the world, that we're going to make the U.S. rich by these tariffs, and it's a great thing. So you've got people cheering that, but what they don't understand, and they don't believe the economists. They believe Donald Trump, that our country's going to be rich. It's going to be the golden age, but that's not what's going to happen. I mean, I'll just take Wisconsin, for example. A lot of our crops that are grown here, they need to have potash. It's like a major thing for them to grow, and probably hit Iowa too. Where's that come from? It comes from Canada. So if there's a tariff on that, that's going to increase their costs. The same thing is true with cheese. If we put these tariffs on and these other countries do the same thing, then they're not going to be able to ship their cheese. They just had the international cheese contest here in Wisconsin this week, and they're all talking about that. So they're extremely worried about it. And I talked to the woman that heads up the Canada office for a lot of the states yesterday, and she said, Canadian, she goes, what Donald Trump managed to do is that something that no other president has ever done. He's managed to create Canadian unity, and it's against the U.S. Every province has taken away that they cannot use any U.S. products, any U.S. components into any infrastructure projects. So they don't want us right now because of what we're doing. And then you add insult to injury when Donald Trump posted something and called him Governor Trudeau. I mean, people in Canada are really angry.
I mean, if you really start thinking through the new policies and they change almost daily, but when you really start thinking about it, like with the automotive industry, the states, especially the states on the East Coast, have spent millions of dollars recruiting foreign automotive manufacturers to come to their states. And in Mississippi, we have Toyota and Nissan. And most of these companies, they brought a lot of their suppliers with them, and some of their components are made in their industrial zone, in the Nissan and the Toyota industrial zone. But a lot of these products, a lot of the parts and everything are coming from Mexico and some from Canada. So now, you've got Nissan saying, well, we're not going to be able to assemble cars here because we can't get the parts. And so they're saying, well, it looks like we're going to have to lay off about 20,000 people, because we can't make cars. And the states have invested all of this time and money in these recruitment efforts and have given all of these incentives, tax incentives,
Right,
and everything else to these companies. And, now our federal trade policy is not going to allow them to function.
Again, I'm going to talk about Wisconsin because as I hear this and I know what's going on here, like a soybean is one thing, and we're not just the only soybean manufacturer. The last time that they're in 2017, when Donald Trump increased the tariffs, shipping that to China, they found a new market. So these markets have not even come back from that. When the markets are uncertain, they're going to go someplace else. And if they can provide or get what they need, they're not going to come back here. So that whole uncertainty it's a horrible pattern.
We've learned from history, that this doesn't work. We will see some foreign investment coming in. I mean, President Trump's, heralding that, oh yes, I got a company to come into, I think Alabama's made the commitments for a Taiwan operation, Taiwanese semiconductor operation. There will be some, they're going to, come in, but, the three of us are, we're trade directors focusing on trade. We always worked with our colleagues who were in the investment side of the business, and, investment's great. It does create jobs. It was a sexy part of international business for the various states because, you have these big, massive, PR splashes and 1,000 jobs are created. But in the long term, these companies pivot on a dime if they're not making money. So it sounds really good. Oh, wonderful. Taiwan Semiconductor is going to come in and create they're going to invest billions. But, you do the research 5 years from now, is it going to be there? The markets change dramatically. Big companies shift on a dime and will go wherever it's cheaper to produce the product, wherever they have the better, employees with the training. Trade, on the other hand, we help small companies. They stay in the local environment. They are willing to. They every time they add a new representative overseas, they have to add more staff, right? And they're building more product or producing more product, which also increases more people to be hired in our respective states. So I'm hoping the governors are going to get out and speak about this. I'm glad to hear from Liz that SIDO is looking at this. Liz and Mary, that's great that you guys have remained in contact with these folks. Hopefully they're going to rally their governors to bring this to the forefront.